Welcome, everyone, to another installment of the Stablecoin Solutions Show, the first and only show on X dedicated to talking all things stablecoins. If you miss this live stream on X, of course, you can catch it on YouTube, and you will also get access to the podcast, which is available on Spotify and Apple iTunes. While I post the announcement that we are live, I want to remind everyone, if you have not done so yet, to please go ahead and download a free copy of my guide, Make Your Wallet Your Bank. It's free, and it empowers consumers and businesses to learn that there is a better way with stablecoins to move your money faster, cheaper, and to break away from the banks and their fee extraction economy. And I'm very proud to have put that out to help give consumers a leg up on how they can stay ahead of the banks and improve their bottom line instead of giving away more of their bottom line to the banks. So Make Your Wallet Your Bank is available. The link is in my profile on Linktree, and it is the pinned tweet on my X account. And I'd love it if you could join the community and learn more about how you can use stablecoins and integrate them into your life. Now, talking about integrating stablecoins into your life, obviously, we are still trying to get the Clarity Act over the finish line. President Trump came out with a very, very direct post on Truth Social expressing his frustration at the Gensler era, and that the Gensler regulation by enforcement era chased a lot of crypto innovation offshore. And he wants to see that crypto innovation come back and stay in the United States. And Trump understands, and I think a lot of the people that are advising Trump on this understand, that U.S. dominance of blockchain technology is critically important. We need to preserve that foothold on this technology, and we were obviously set back tremendously during the Biden era with respect to Gensler and the way he handled the SEC's control over digital asset sector. And Trump wants that Clarity Act to get over the finish line because he and the people that are advising him, I think, understand that if we do not get legislation on the books via the Clarity Act, that we jeopardize everything that's been built to this point. Yes, we have favorable leadership at the SEC and the CFTC, but that's not enough, because if there is a change in the power dynamic in Congress, if the midterms go the other way, which all indications are they probably will at the rate the economy is going, unless Trump can turn it around dramatically this summer, he's in danger of potentially losing both the House and the Senate in the midterms if things go really bad. And if that happens, then that closes the very, very small window we have to get the Clarity Act over the finish line, because if it gets punted across the summer and into the next legislative session, well, that is going to probably put the gavel in Elizabeth Warren's hands on the Senate Banking Committee, and it's going to completely shift the power paradigm. As I understand it, there's probably about 7 or 8 Democrats that need to come across the aisle to finally push clarity across the goal line when it does ultimately come up for a vote in the Senate. And one of the sticking points has been the ethics provisions. A lot of Democrats, including Warren, are demanding that there be restrictions on the Trump family and Trump in particular in what he can do in digital assets and in the digital assets sector, because he's privy, obviously, to shaping policy in that sector. And he has been no secret, has been doing a lot of stock trading of late, and has built a lot in the digital asset sector through his family's ventures. And people feel like, especially a lot of the Dems that are very vocal about this, that there should be limitations, conflict checks, etc. And that could end up being the biggest hurdle for the Clarity Act's passage. While I think it's probably sitting at about 50-50 right now that it'll happen, if they don't iron out this ethics clause issue. And there is obviously a tinge of irony in all this when you consider all the jokes that fly around about Nancy Pelosi's trading record since entering Congress. And it's obvious that the net worth of a lot of these sitting Congress members have gone up substantially. They all tend to have much more in their bank accounts than they actually get paid for working in Congress. And a lot of people theorize that that's because they have access to a lot of information that gives them a significant advantage in trading markets. So while I appreciate the concern, it ought to be across the board. But in any event, we'll leave that for where it is, because that's essentially sort of at the mercy of the Senate's calendar and whether they can get this thing done or not. And I, of course, will continue to report on that. The really significant event that I want to talk about in today's show, and I don't have a co-host today, John Wingate, who always is kind enough when he can to jump in and be a guest and co-host on this, is unavailable today. So we hoped we can get John from Bank Social in for the next episode. But doesn't mean we don't have things to talk about. And one of the most significant things that I want to cover is this announcement by Cash App. Cash App has brought USDC to roughly 60 million users. And I cannot downplay the significance of this for stablecoin adoption. As you know, Jack Dorsey, former founder of Twitter and in charge of Block, which runs Cash App, has been pushing very hard on Bitcoin integration into Block and into point-of-sale payments. Jack's a big believer in Bitcoin, and Jack understands that obviously fiat's in trouble, and Bitcoin is probably the best hedge against that volatility. But Jack also understands, in the same way that I understand in writing my book and kind of my mantra, that we need to exist in the economy that we are currently in. We can build for what we think that economy will look like in the future, but the reality is we are currently in a fiat-dominated world. You still have to rely on fiat at the point of sale to buy goods and services in the United States. And while Bitcoin is certainly making strides, it is not available universally at the point of sale. So Jack has made a sizable investment in building USDC stablecoin infrastructure into Cash App, because he understands that that, as I've said many times, I think is the Trojan horse that's going to lead to adoption of other assets like Bitcoin and other altcoins, because stablecoins will be that on-ramp, that Trojan horse that will sneak users into using blockchain technology without them actually knowing that they're using blockchain technology. And that's how we get the, quote, normies into crypto. Now, the significance of this announcement is huge because, as I said, Cash App is already integrated into roughly 60 million users, apps on their phones, etc. It's used quite extensively for sending and receiving money. It can be used through its debit card for purchases at point of sale. So the announcement that Cash App has now enabled USDC over Solana, Ethereum, Polygon, and Arbitrum is a stunning development that is going to create massive distribution channel for stablecoins. And while I think this is such a positive breakthrough, there are some things we still have to acknowledge about this. And I put out a piece today. I also want to announce that I have renamed my longstanding Substack newsletter, which formerly was known as the DeFi Defender. I renamed it Stablecoin Strategies today because I am starting to really focus on providing content that gives real in-depth strategic analysis of what is going on in the stablecoin sector. And I think that name is more fitting with exactly where I see things going as far as my content and my platform. So Stablecoin Strategies has now replaced the DeFi Defender on Substack. If you're not a subscriber to that, link is in my profile as well. I'd love it if you joined. Today's piece that I put out is entitled Cash App Brought USDC to 60 million users. The hard half comes next. Because here's my thesis. Yes, it's fantastic that now we have 60 million users who probably never had access to stablecoins, who now have an easy way to move stablecoins from their existing crypto wallets into Cash App and then spend them as if it's fiat. That's amazing. You cannot downplay the reach of that. But there's still another half of this. Yesterday, I put out a video on TikTok and I gave a demo of paying for a cup of coffee at my favorite coffee shop with my Coinbase debit card. I can't find my Cash App debit card at the moment, so I may have to reorder that one. But I did want to test And I wanted to show people that, yeah, it's very easy to pay in stables. You know, the mantra of my book, Make Your Wallet Your Bank, has been spend in stables, stack in sats, make your wallet your bank. And this advancement by Cash App and what already exists with the Coinbase debit card is a step in that direction, because what I demonstrated yesterday was that I took out that USDC Coinbase debit card. When it came time to pay for my cappuccino, tapped it at the point of sale for the merchant. It went through perfectly. What happened under the hood? And this is where we need to take a step back and talk about the significance of Cash App and talk about what still needs to be done to build towards the true make your wallet your bank economy that I talk about, is that when the merchant's payment is processed, that sends a message to Coinbase to take that equivalent of my coffee, which was $5 and change with the tip, and convert that from USDC that I currently hold in my Coinbase account to fiat. So yes, I'm spending in stables, but I'm still going through a fiat conversion. And then what Coinbase is doing on their end, because that debit card is tied to Visa, is that Coinbase is going to then send that fiat through the Visa merchant network, through their system of processing payments. They're going to process that payment just like they would any debit or credit card payment traditionally. And ultimately, they'll batch that payment out and they'll pay it to the coffee shop in fiat. So why is this different than what I think is the perfect world? And look, we're not going to let perfect be the enemy of good. This is a tremendous innovation, and I cannot downplay what Coinbase and now Cash App have integrated as far as getting us there. But it still doesn't solve one half of the problems. That's why I say we're 50% there, because once the merchant receives that payment through my Coinbase debit or through, let's say, Cash App, yes, they're going to get paid in fiat because they're not yet enabled to accept stablecoins. So they still have to deal with the extraction of merchant fees from the credit card side. They still have to deal with the delay in getting their money. And what a pure stablecoin economy looks like and what it solves for that is that the consumer swipes at the point of sale or taps their phone or taps their debit card, whatever you want to call it. The stablecoins leave the consumer's wallet in a pure wallet infrastructure, because remember, regardless of how you're doing this, you're still not operating on the Cash App level yet. I think we're going to get there, but you're still not at the level that you have your wallet as your bank, where you're custodying those stable coins in the true sense. There's still a conversion to fiat going on there, because Jack realizes that there's too much friction at this point in trying to do pure stablecoin payments. But this again is that Trojan horse to inch your way into the consumer's wallet with stablecoins, and I think it's brilliant, and I'm here for it. What still is lacking is the fact that in a pure stablecoin transaction, when the merchant receives that tap at their point of sale, if it's a true stablecoin transaction, then they don't have to worry about intermediaries. They don't have to worry about the bank having their finger in the pie. They simply receive from the consumer stablecoins directly from their digital wallet to the business's digital wallet. That USDC arrives instantly for pennies on the dollar, and it completely bypasses the plumbing of the credit card banking system. That's where I think all of this is going, obviously. But, as I said, we're not there yet. We still have to pass through a little bit of a toll booth economy in getting there. Because when the USDC reaches a business, it doesn't arrive to the business as USDC. It's settled the way Cash App has always settled payments, in fiat, through traditional bank rails, on business day only, and with the usual processing fees that come. So in order to fully eliminate all that, you have to totally rewire the plumbing here, which is probably a contradiction. You have to replumb the plumbing, because unless the merchant is enabled to receive stablecoins directly, and that requires a specific integration into their point of sale that doesn't yet universally exist, then they can't get the full benefit. The consumer gets the benefit of being able to spend in stables, and that's great. And look, what I did yesterday was fun, but it's not a true stablecoin economy, and that's why I'm very upfront about where we're at and how we still need to work on the off-ramp solutions. I think we're going to get there, and I think that we're going to slowly start to see, as people understand what stablecoins empower them to do, that we're going to have an economy which can exist outside of dependency on intermediaries. Yes, there are intermediaries to an extent because you're still operating from a point of sale network, but this is a tremendous step forward. And this is why Visa, predominantly Visa, I think, has really been leading on this. MasterCard's catching up. Western Union's catching up. All the payment processors are catching up to the reality that they cannot continue to justify delaying merchants and getting their money. Merchants deserve to get paid when the sale is finished. The fact that they have to wait while their money's parked in a float with some credit card bank infrastructure network, the fact they have to give up 3.5% on average in processing fees before they ever get their money is something that really is hard to justify at this point anymore, now that the genie's out of the bottle and we have stablecoins. So I think we're going to see that plumbing start to get integrated, and it's going to force credit card companies to go to near zero in their fee structure if they want to stay competitive. Because if there is, in fact, an opportunity at the point of sale to do a direct stablecoin to stablecoin transaction, a pure wallet to wallet, in the sense of make your wallet your bank infrastructure, then the spend in stables narrative really catches traction. Because now, once consumers wake up to this, they understand that they're doing the business a favor because the business doesn't have to suffer losing that money. So you'll start to see signs, I predict, pop up that are going to replace those existing signs you see at a lot of merchants' locations. 3.5% discount if you pay in cash. What the merchant is basically telling you there is, look, I got to eat these fees, so I'd rather you pay me in cash so I can get my money in hand now, as opposed to having to forfeit 3.5% of it and wait several days to get my money. Problem is, as I've talked about before, nobody spends in cash anymore. Nobody has cash on hand anymore. Everyone prefers to tap and pay. Last week we talked about it on the last episode of Stablecoin Solutions, where John, who was joining me as co-host, talked about the fact he prefers to just pay with his watch. He just likes to integrate everything into his watch and his Apple Watch, pay at the point of sale. So the consumer wants less friction at the point of sale. The merchant wants to get paid immediately, and that's what this all solves for. So this is incredibly innovative breakthrough. It opens the door finally to what we've all wanted to see, which is a Genius Act compliant stablecoin economy. We're getting there. Of course, as I've been covering for a long time now, I launched Stablecoin Solutions back in August after the Genius Act passed in July of 2025. We're waiting for the final regulatory rollout. We still have OCC and Treasury and FinCEN, and everyone's working out how they're going to handle the anti-money laundering components of it, the KYC components of it, how this is going to play within existing financial rails, and what the regulatory framework is going to look like for the mandatory auditing and full transparency of reserves that come with fully regulated stablecoins. You see, what this solves is what we did not have in the past when it came to stablecoins. Yes, we had USDC for a long time before we had the Genius Act. And yes, of course, Tether's been a global dominant stablecoin payment option for a long time before we had the Genius Act. But what the Genius Act and the brilliance of what it brings to the table is it completely legitimizes digital dollars, not CBDCs. I know that they look and talk and walk a lot like CBDCs from a lot of people's perspective, but understand they are not CBDCs because these are not government-issued digital dollars. They're not fully controlled by the government, fully monitored. These are private sector, Circle, Tether, etc. PayPal. These are private sector digital dollars. But now what we have finally is we have a requirement with very stiff penalties if you fail to comply. So if you're in the sector and you are looking towards making that pivot from the current wild west of stablecoins, where there hasn't been a ton of clarity on the auditing and the attestations and the segregation of funds, because remember, the fundamental principle of a stablecoin under the Genius Act is for every Genius Act stablecoin that's born, a treasury equivalent dollar denominated asset must be custodied in a segregated account that does not overlap with the operating account of the issuer, which means your stablecoin is as good as a dollar and backed by a dollar equivalent asset at all times. And when you spend that stablecoin, you burn that stablecoin, you redeem that dollar, it's done. Before, we had kind of the Wild West where we weren't clear what the peg was based on: gold, algorithmic coins in the Terra Luna disaster, or other assets. This brings the regulatory clarity that's necessary to make stablecoins a global payment rail. I've talked about and written about this extensively, that Scott Bessent knew full well what he was doing when he advocated for passage of the Genius Act, just like he knows full well what he's doing when he's advocating, as he did yesterday when he filled in for Carolyn Levitt at the White House press conference and talked about the fact we need to get the Clarity Act done. He knows full well what the hell's going on here. He knows the dollar's under pressure. He knows treasury demand is waning, and he knows that in order to spark demand for treasuries, we need to take the dollar digital and we need to take it global, so that countries that don't have easy access to paper dollars can get easy access to digital dollars. And again, every digital dollar that's created under the Genius Act creates a treasury asset, so that treasury demand flywheel is something he's very excited about. So if you are currently in the stablecoin game, and this is why it's important to follow my content, subscribe to my newsletter, Stablecoin Strategies, on Substack, follow me on X, subscribe to the podcast so you get updates, YouTube, etc. Download the free guide, Make Your Wallet Your Bank, is because we are quickly pivoting from that, quote, wild west of stablecoins to a fully regulated regime. And if you are not ready for that, if you don't have your house in order as a stablecoin issuer, as a fintech, as a bank looking to get into stablecoins, as a merchant, you got to understand that there are strict requirements. We're also looking at a world where we're going to have branded stablecoins, where big brands like Walmart, Amazon, they're going to be launching their own stablecoins through qualified issuers in compliance with the Genius Act. And if they get it wrong, if they don't handle KYC, know your customer, or AML, anti-money laundering standards, if they don't handle that stuff correctly, or if they don't keep proper auditing, because all this has to be certified, somebody has to sign off and say, yeah, our reserves match our stablecoin output, and everything is to the penny. If you can't demonstrate that to the regulators once this all goes live, you're going to get wrecked with tremendous fines and sanctions, and even in some extreme cases, criminal consequences. So it makes it more important than ever that you have a stablecoin strategy, which is why I just rebranded that Substack newsletter to Stablecoin Strategies, because that's where I do a lot of the in-depth analysis, where I talk about what's necessary for compliance. I talk about scenarios where you can be out of compliance and what that looks like once we finally make this pivot. And remember, the final stuff's coming down July of 2026. By January of 2027, all this must be by statute live and ready to roll. So we got about a 6-month window here between July and January of 2027, where integration of Genius Act compliant stablecoins is not just going to be a goal, because right now that's really what it is. You got Tether coming into the United States with their USDT, and they want to be compliant with the Genius Act. You've got Circle that's been compliant on a 50-state money transmitter level. They've been the most compliant U.S. stablecoin issuer in that sense. And everyone's been on the fringes of this Genius Act compliance, because it is not yet officially, it is the law, but it still has to get the regulatory frameworks developed. So everyone's complying as best they can with what Genius Act expects in preparation for what's coming. But at some point, that switch is going to come on and you're going to have to be in full compliance. And if you don't have your house in order, if you are not at least connected to some level of authority on this to tell you whether you are doing this right or wrong, if you're not subscribing to the right in-depth analysis of what right looks like, you could get wrecked. And the fines and the consequences are pretty steep. So again, we're going into the weekend. Happy Friday, everyone. This is going to be a shorter than usual show for me, but I did want to touch on that major development, which is the Cash App announcement. I think that is going to be tremendously bullish for stablecoin adoption by consumers. We're still not completely there. We need to get across the goal line here as far as getting Clarity Act done. I'll continue to monitor that. We still need to solve the other half of the Cash App process, which is we need merchants to be enabled to be able to accept stablecoins seamlessly at the point of sale without having to go to intermediaries like credit card companies. So we're halfway there with the Cash App announcement, and I have every reason to believe that Jack is not done innovating there. He knows what's happening here. He gets it. And we've still got, obviously, the rollout of all the regulations that I'll continue to monitor. So I'm going to bring this one to a close for today. To everyone who joined the live broadcast, thank you. If you haven't yet followed me on X, please do so. If you have not yet subscribed and downloaded my free guide, Make Your Wallet Your Bank, please do so. It's easy. It's in all my profiles as well as in my pinned tweet. It's an easy download. It'll just cost you an email address, and then you're joining a community where you as a consumer and a merchant are getting all this free information about how you can learn to integrate stablecoins into your life. And I think that's a fight worth having. And I think that's something I'm very excited about continuing to teach on. Also, if you missed this live broadcast, you can catch the replay. I'll have this uploaded to X, obviously, and I will have it uploaded to my Spotify and Apple iTunes podcast, so you can follow it there. And it'll also be available on YouTube, on my YouTube account. So no excuses. There's plenty of totally free stablecoin education out there for you to learn how to make your wallet your bank, to learn how to integrate this stuff into your life. And I'm going to continue to build on that. I'm not done. And again, I rebranded the newsletter on Substack from the DeFi Defender, which it has been for a long time, to Stablecoin Strategies. So I encourage you to, if you haven't followed that newsletter yet as well, go ahead and do that. Going to close it for today. Thank you again to everyone who joined. And remember, we run this every Friday live, 8 a.m. My time, Central, 9 a.m. Eastern, Stablecoin Solution Show, the first and only X space dedicated to talking all things stablecoins. And we'll be back at it again next Friday. Thanks, everyone. Also, if you want to catch me, I'll probably be joining the Crypto Town Hall today at 10:15 Eastern to continue this conversation. And if you want to continue that conversation and learn more about what's going on in the digital asset space, I always encourage people to jump on to Scott Melker's show, Crypto Town Hall, with Dave Weisberger, the co-host. We have great conversations on X in a live space, and there's plenty to learn about there as well. So that'll do it for today. Thanks, everyone, and have a great weekend.